So, hello everybody. Here I'm back. It's been a while since I've done one of my sound bites, but I just wanted to answer a couple of questions that have been asked of me. And one of them is, what have you been up to? Well, I've been back at my studies since October, so term started again in October. So since then, I've been working on my TM 111, which is an IT related course with the Open University in Britain. So I've been quite busy doing this. I also traveled on business for a week. I've also been doing quite a lot of painting. So I've worked a little bit more on my Descent miniatures. So I've started on the Shadow of Nerek and also on a couple of other ones. The base set is now completely painted. And some from other expansions, but I've actually decided not to keep the expansions separate because it doesn't make any difference. You can actually mix them in because you can, when you play the way I do, you can actually choose monsters from different expansions. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been up to with regard to Descent. And I'm also going to answer a question which was asked of me in connection with my playthrough, or the first part of the playthrough of the Wendigo Call of Cthulhu role-playing game solo adventure, where I said that I actually don't really like the Call of Cthulhu system. And somebody said, why don't you like it? What do you dislike about it? And if you saw my collection of game books, you would actually be surprised if I told you that I'm not actually very happy with the Call of Cthulhu RPG, because I have very many books in English, in German, in French, different campaigns, The Mountains of Madness, all kinds of even the old books. I've got Cthulhu by Gaslight, the original box set, and so on and so forth. So it's a bit strange, because for somebody who dislikes it, why do I collect it? Well, first of all, I collect it because I'm a collector, and and I like looking at those books and and reading some of the stories. But I don't think that it works as a game system, at least not for me. And the reasons are varied. Number one, I think that especially the Chaosium guys concentrate on one part, an aspect of Lovecraft's work which exists. It's there. They're not misinterpreting it. It's the pulp part of his work. But they then call it a horror role-playing game, and none of their publications are particularly horrific or horrifying or even fear-inducing. Because what they do is they take the pulp side of Lovecraft, which is present in a lot of his work, but which isn't particularly horrifying. And by pulp, I mean the sometimes completely over-the-top description of monsters. The word ichor comes up quite a lot. Tentacles, sucking mouths. If you just pick up the book or the novella, The Dunwich Horror, and you read the description of Wilbur Whately when he dies in Arkham at the university buildings, and they basically strip him, and you see and they describe what he looks like from the waist down. First of all, I think any Freudian psychoanalyst would have a field day analyzing the description that Lovecraft gives of this particular being, of this creature. But also, they're so over the top, you can't really take them seriously. They are not very terror-inducing. They are just descriptions. The same with with the Great Cthulhu in Call of Cthulhu. He looks, ugly, of course, and we've all seen pictures of him. He's not a beautiful chap. He's not a handsome creature. But he's also not terrifying. I mean, he's as terrifying as some of the more monstrous types of dinosaurs or deep sea creatures from several millions of years ago. And when you look at them, when you look at re-envisaged images of these creatures, You know, I don't want to run into them. I certainly don't want to meet them. I'm very happy that they have died out and that I live now and didn't live then. But they are not horrific in and of themselves. You know, none of the creatures of Lovecraft are horrific in and of themselves. They are just different, you know. While, of course, nobody wants to meet the Great Cthulhu because meeting him will mean that he will probably try to eat you. He's just a predator. He just looks very different. And he's actually not such a strange being. I could envisage that there are beings that look like him, or that there were beings that look like him. Same with the Byakhee, you know, they are thin flying entities, you know. If we ever saw one, we would probably go, oh, that looks strange. That looks like a really, really weird being. But would we just be terrified because we saw it? No, we would probably just be surprised. Of course, then having said this, he wrote at a time when we knew a lot less about the world itself, where we come from, how it has developed, how it has evolved. We have seen a lot more since then. So maybe at the time of writing, people would have been terrified by these creatures, but today, you know, they're not really that terrifying. I mean, I don't get terrified by the creature in Alien, you know, whereas Alien is a truly horrifying film. But it's not because of the creature itself. The creature in and of itself is a predator that's trying to survive, you know. It's alien because it comes from a different planet. It's certainly not human, but it's in and of itself not terrifying. It's as terrifying to me as a white shark. A white shark would be terrifying to me because if I ever encountered one, they might eat me. Just like if I ever encounter the banana head from Alien, it might just decide to eat me. That's terrifying because we don't want to die. But the creature in and of itself is just a creature. There's nothing terrifying about it. It just looks strange, just like Cthulhu looks strange, just like Wilbur Whateley looks strange, just like the Dunwich Horror itself, once it becomes visible, looks strange. But if it just looked strange and otherwise, you know, was trying to sell you bath powder or a Bible maybe even, you would probably not have any problems with it. The problem is that it's terrifying and it seems to be trying to kill people, or does kill people. And so to call Call of Cthulhu the way Chaosium use it a horror game is wrong in my opinion, because it's not very horrific. And that's one thing that I have a problem with, because their adventures are too pulpy for my taste. They're so over the top, you know, and add another monster and take something else from the Cthulhu mythos and put in something else. Whereas, you know, when you read Lovecraft's work, he usually only has one or two types of creatures appear. It's not, oh, and there's Cthulhu, and look, here we've got a deep one, and we'll throw in Dagon, and Mother Hydra, and how about a couple of Byakhee for good measure? Whereas when you play a Call of Cthulhu Chaosium RPG, they pile on the monsters, and it gets really old after a very, very, very short while. However, the parts of Lovecraft which are truly horrifying, they completely ignore. And I think one of the most horrifying works of fiction I've ever read, and it's not just Lovecraft, but it's generally speaking, is The Color Out of Space. Now, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I think that everyone should have read this story. Because it's incredibly terrifying. And interestingly enough, and this is the spoiler of the week, I guess, there isn't a single creature in that book. There isn't a single Cthulhian creature, mythos creature in that story. But it's truly horrifying. Another short story, very short story that I find terribly terrifying, but that's just me probably, is Polaris. It's just a couple of pages long, but it conjures up such a feeling of, at least in me, such a feeling of solitude and abandonment that I find it truly horrifying. So there are stories by Lovecraft where the horror is truly horrific, where it's really psychological, but it happens inside of you. And he doesn't need any creatures. He doesn't need any jump scares. Just thinking about the human condition, and he does that in some of his stories, make the story horrifying. And that's what I really miss in the Chaosium written stories. They're just pulp, and they're not really very entertaining either. I mean, I've read many of them, and you know, oh look, there's a Byakhee. Oh yeah, let's roll sanity. Which brings me to the second gripe that I have with the whole system. It is true that people in Lovecraft suffer mental injuries. Let's put it this way. I don't want to use the phrase they go mad, because I think that's a misconception. Because we know today that you can't just go mad. I mean, madness or a real psychological illness, let's say like schizophrenia or something along those lines, where you would really say somebody is so mentally deranged that they don't know what they're doing, that they are also incapable of functioning at all, or function normally. You know, they might start killing people. You know, those conditions exist. They are fortunately very, very rare. It's not something that's very common, but they are not induced by people suffering traumatic experiences. Schizophrenics usually display schizophrenia at a very early age. The first symptoms, the first behaviors come to light at a very early age, which is also why it's called dementia praecox, which means precocious dementia, as opposed to old age dementia. And those people have not met Cthulhu and then gone crazy. Those people have not gone to the mountains of madness and then gone crazy. But in the game, you have to roll sanity whenever something happens, and then you lose sanity more and more. And when you get to a certain level of insanity, or sanity loss is too high, you're actually incapable of going on. You know, you get a trauma, worst case scenario, your investigator needs to be retired. You need to get a different hero out, or well, they're not even heroes, they're investigators. So from a role-playing perspective, you don't really have this attachment to a character that you move through the story, that you improve, who gains experience, who gets better at certain things. But they're actually cannon fodder. And Chaosium even say it in this. There was one Chaosium written adventure series, Harvest of something, Blood Harvest or something like that, 2 years ago maybe, or 1 year ago, and they even said that it's set in the university town of Arkham, and since investigators are expendable, you can always just, you know, once your investigator dies or goes crazy, you can just pick another Arkham student, because there are so many Arkham students and they're just expendable, just like the investigator. So that's the premise of the whole RPG, and I dislike that, because I enjoy character building, I enjoy character advancement. But that's not how this works. Even through a campaign, you might end up with 3, 4, 5, 6 characters that you have to play. And that isn't really what I enjoy. I enjoy having a character, getting to know that character, building relationships within that character with other PCs or NPCs even. But I want to have this progression, and I want to have this character, and character death should mean something. Character retirement should mean something, and not just, oh yeah, well, you know, oh, sorry, failed his 2 sanity rolls in a row, is now crazy. That's what I dislike mechanically, and also because it doesn't really gel with reality. And one could say, okay, well, this is a horror RPG. You shouldn't think about reality, but you have to think about reality as well. You can only suspend your disbelief so much. And while people don't go crazy when they go to the Mountains of Madness and see giant albino penguins and meet the great old ones, or see and go to Rillier and meet Cthulhu and then go crazy, and not everybody does, because remember the Norwegian captain who sees Cthulhu rise from Rillier doesn't go crazy. No, not at all. He actually writes down his story in English so that his wife doesn't read it and doesn't get involved. But he isn't crazy at all. He has all his wits about him. He retells the story in great detail. And then, of course, on the other hand, you have the Mountains of Madness, where the professor stays perfectly sane, whereas Danforth actually goes crazy, or so we are led to believe. Now, what really happens, if you look at it from a psychological point of view, is these people suffer traumas, and those traumas are really bad. But of course, they don't drive you crazy in real life. They will lead to stress, post-traumatic stress syndrome, which can be very, very devastating, and which is devastating for an individual and their surroundings if you don't treat it, and if you don't take care of these people, if you don't take care of these victims who are essentially shell-shocked. And we've known of the phenomenon of shell shock since the First World War. That's where the name actually comes from. So, of course, these people need to be helped. But they are not insane. They don't need to be confined to an asylum for the rest of their lives. Help can be given. Maybe not in the 1920s when Lovecraft was writing, but definitely today. So even though they say, okay, you have to go back to the 1920s and it's set in the 1920s, it just doesn't gel. With me, it just doesn't gel. I would accept something like temporarily being incapacitated, and then you take a couple of penalties. But this idea of you go completely crazy doesn't work for me at all. Which brings me to the next part, and that is the fact that when you learn spells, because there are spells in the Call of Cthulhu realm, in the RPG at least, you lose sanity when you cast them. Okay? Now, you're also faced with human opponents. They're usually called cultists. And their sanity, when you look at their stats, is usually 0. And they are really powerful. They can cast spells. They can do all kinds of things. Their sanity is 0, but they're fully functional. If you, as an investigator, go to 0, you're not functioning at all. So this mismatch really, really annoys me, because here you have people who are really powerful and who have harnessed the mythos, who have looked into the abyss, have gone completely insane because their sanity is at 0, but they can do all kinds of things. But I look into the abyss, I learn more, I find out more about the truth. I lose sanity, and then I'm just a babbling idiot sitting in an insane asylum. That's not how this works. Either everybody looks into the abyss and goes crazy and is non-functional, or everyone looks into the abyss, loses sanity, but can function and continue to do so. This mismatch makes no sense whatsoever, story-wise, mechanical-wise. I have no idea why they came up with this. It's totally illogical. And it also goes against something that I truly believe in, and that is that knowledge is power. Knowledge never, ever disempowers you. Learning new things, finding out about the world, can never ever be detrimental to you and to your sanity. You may be disconcerted, and I'll come to this later, and it may be confusing, and I'll come to this later, but it can never ever impair negatively. It can never impact negatively on your mental capacities, and it can't impair your judgment in such a way that you would go completely insane or even get post-traumatic stress syndrome. I think if you read about the fact that, the Earth was not at the center of the universe and was actually also round and not a disc, you wouldn't go crazy. You might want to disbelieve it because it goes against everything you've ever been taught, but you wouldn't go crazy. No one went crazy when they were told, oh, by the way, we have a heliocentric solar system and not a geocentric solar system. Nobody went crazy. They didn't like it because it went against the teachings of the church, saying that, the earth and man is at the center of everything. But, nobody went crazy over it. And when we first realized that probably the universe is constantly expanding and infinite in its size, nobody went crazy over this. When we got the theory of relativity and Einstein proved all kinds of things around, even how time travel might actually be possible, nobody went crazy. When they first discovered black holes and wormholes and basically theorized around them, or when we first found out about quantum physics and how it can be possible for someone to walk through a solid wall at quantum level, it's only very, very, very improbable, but it's not impossible. Nobody went crazy when they learned it. They expanded their knowledge beyond anything and everything that mankind had ever known, but nobody went crazy. So why would you go crazy if you learn a spell that does some kind of thing, or that you can conjure up something? I might not like what I conjure up, and I might die because the thing that I conjure up might eat me, but I wouldn't go crazy. So that whole mechanic is something that I truly dislike. And I remember doing a playtest for Delta Green, which is Call of Cthulhu in the modern world, in the modern era. And we were exploring this cave. And then weird stuff happened, and I don't even remember the details. And then you had to roll on your intelligence or something. And I remember that everyone who had an intelligence that was higher than something went crazy. And the people who were dumb, because there was also a group of Marines, and they were kind of, maybe not the most intelligent ones, came out unscathed. Why? Because they were so stupid as to not realize that whatever was in that cave, whereas the intelligent people who could put together the puzzle and understand what was going on went crazy. And sorry, that is just so totally far-fetched. I will not accept a game and will not believe in a game mechanic that actually tells you, oh, you're intelligent, you know what's going on, hence you lose. There's just no reason for me to play. There is no reason for me to advance a character. There's no reason for me to become better at things if it actually means, oh yeah, but now, unfortunately, you know so much, you've gone crazy, get a different character. So that's in a nutshell why I really dislike Call of Cthulhu as a game. I will, however, say that I've played a couple of Call of Cthulhu one-shots which were not created by Chaosium and which loosely use the Chaosium rules, which are highly entertaining. And some of them are really horrific. But that's because people have actually captured another side of the Lovecraft spirit and Lovecraft mythos, the one that is truly terrifying. And that's about finding the enemy within, coming to grips with the fact that it's not something outside, it's you. And I think that's probably quite well spelled out in Shadow over Innsmouth, where you then in the end find out that the protagonist who tells the story is actually also infected. He's from Innsmouth. Originally, his family is from there, and he actually has the Innsmouth look. And one day he will transform into one of those Deep One hybrids, and he will join his family, I guess, at the bottom of the ocean. And he comes to terms with the fact that he's actually not human, or not fully human. And I think that's really terrifying. When your own humanity gets called into question, when the things that you think you know are no longer true and they are inside of you. And that's very different from just seeing someone turn into a Deep One. I don't really want to see anyone turn into a Deep One hybrid because they're quite ugly. And I would probably be shocked as it happens, and might actually then, need some treatment afterwards. Post-traumatic stress can be caused by, I'm pretty sure, by watching someone turn into a into a fish person. But that's splatter. That's Evil Dead. That's not terrifying. That doesn't drive you crazy. So that's why I dislike Call of Cthulhu. Okay, next up, Descent. Descent 2nd Edition. I have started to play Descent 2nd Edition, but not using the app. I'm sorry about that one. I know that I said I was going to do a couple of playthroughs of the app, and I will, but not at the moment, because at the moment I'm experimenting with actually playing cooperatively and playing the Overlord as well. So I'm trying different things. There are AI custom-made rules excuse me, out there, which I have investigated, which I've downloaded, printed off, tried to use, decided I didn't want them. So at the moment I'm playing the Overlord and I'm playing the heroes, and I'm just taking the normal turn order. And it works quite well. There are some things where you have to bring in some dice rolling in order to ensure that, you know, people suffer enough, and that you basically ensure that the fact that you are, after all, trying to win against the Overlord does play his cards, even if they hurt the heroes who you are playing as well. And I've also been watching a series of playthroughs of Gloomhaven. Now, Gloomhaven is a legacy game, and I will probably never get it. I mean, last week even I said I'm never going to get a legacy game, and especially not one like Gloomhaven. But now I'm kind of like, well, maybe it would be so nice, but I think I won't cave in. But, you know, you never know. Anyway, Gloomhaven has an initiative mechanic where you draw cards for the enemies, and they have different numbers, and the higher the number, the later they go. And the heroes also have to provide initiative numbers, and I don't know if they have a separate deck. I have not been able to find that one out, or if it's actually on the cards that they're going to play, but that's beside the point. In the end, you end up with one number per enemy group and one number per hero. And then the initiative is determined, and it happens on every round of combat. Or on every round, actually. They only have combat, but of course in Descent you have more than just combat. You've also got exploration. And so what I've now decided to do is I'm also going to use this. I'm going to not play as you would normally play heroes. All heroes go, then the Overlord goes, and then it's back to the heroes. But I'm actually going to assign combat, or actually initiative markers, by pulling chits. So that's a little bit like Hoplite, I guess. Pulling chits and then deciding who goes first, and then taking it from the top of the order. And then once everybody has gone, all of the chits go back in the bag, you draw again, and that's then the next round. I haven't tried that one out. I'm hoping to do this maybe on Wednesday or Thursday, because I'm off Wednesday, Thursday this week. So I'll see how that goes, but I'm going to try this. And also another thing that I have taken from the app is what I don't like about Descent 2nd Edition out of the box is that when you are in the game, your heroes can be knocked out any amount of time. You know, you just then stand up, or you get somebody else to help them up, but there's no limit to it. Whereas in the app, you have something, I think it's called, is it called reputation or something? You have a score, and whenever you get knocked out, whenever a hero gets knocked out, this reputation is taken down a notch, and when you reach 0, you lose. The heroes lose. And I've decided to do the same thing as well. So we start out with one. So at the very first part of the campaign, you start out with 1 reputation point per hero that you play. So if you have 4 heroes, you start out with 4. And then whenever somebody gets knocked out, you take it down by 1. And if you ever have run out of reputation, the Overlord wins that particular encounter or scenario. When the heroes win a scenario, reputation goes up by 1. If the Overlord wins, reputation remains unchanged. When you have an encounter, when you have a scenario that's split into 2 encounters, when the encounter resets, usually what happens is you get all of your hero special abilities back. At the moment, I'm playing that you do not get your reputation back. So at the moment, I'm at reputation 6. I had 3 knockouts in the first encounter of, I think, the 3rd scenario of the Heirs of Blood. So now the 2nd encounter looms, and I don't get my reputation back up to 6. I have to now try and get through the encounter with only 3 knockouts. Why am I doing this? Because I just find it really weird that you can get knocked out left, right, and center, because you can play really recklessly. And so far I've never been in danger of losing ever, because I just kept resurrecting my heroes. And I think that that's not how the game should be played. So I'm actually putting a timer on this one and a limit as to how many times you can be resurrected. I don't know what I'm going to do if somebody gets knocked out and then our reputation is at 0. I'm thinking one could say this is permadeath and you need a new hero. I'm kind of thinking about this, but then again, I'm also kind of really in love with the heroes that I'm playing, and I don't really want to change them, but I'll have to think about it. So that's Descent. And now lastly, I would like to do a little bit of a shout out for a Netflix series, which premiered, I believe, on the 1st of December. I don't know if it's available in the United States, but it's definitely available in Europe. And it's called Dark. Interestingly enough, it's a German TV series, and that shouldn't, I mean, the issue with that is you can either watch it in German, if you understand German, or you can watch it in German with subtitles, or you can use the dubbed version. And I know that a lot of people don't like to watch stuff with subtitles, and they don't like to watch dubbed stuff. So if you're in that category, unfortunately, you'll never be able to watch it. And it is a very, very intriguing series. It's 10 chapters long, so to speak. And spoilers. This is very important. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the series, and it's impossible to talk about the contents without actually spoiling it. It's about a group of people who live in a place called Winden, and that's completely fictitious. This place does not exist at all. And some people have likened it to Twin Peaks, some people have likened it to Stranger Things, and I can see why. But I'd say it's very different from both of them in terms of the story is simply very, very different. And it's to do with time travel. I'll tell you this up front. There is time travel involved, and it actually deals with this paradox of living in a time loop. It's extremely well done. I was actually very surprised at how good it is. I made the mistake that I first started watching it when I was kind of in a bad mood, and I felt like I was falling behind on many things, you know, work-wise and study-wise. And so I basically tried to calm down and say, okay, so now it's the end of the day, you're going to sit down, you're just going to, you know, take some time to yourself and watch this. But I was so distracted and always thinking about other things that I didn't pay as much attention to it as I should have, because after about 2 or 3 episodes, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. It was totally confusing. And I thought, okay, this is very badly made, you know, three chapters in, it's more confusing and more opaque than it was at the beginning, where you would actually expect things to get a little more clearer as you progress through the story. But I persisted and I kept watching, and the last 2 or 3 episodes, I was actually in a better place mentally, and I actually paid a lot of attention, and suddenly a lot of things made sense. And I have to say, it was extremely riveting. And then I said, okay, I will have to watch this again, but this time round, I have to pay close attention. So I did. I watched it a second time around, and it's really good. It's really good. You have to pay attention. There's a lot of people involved. And since it's a time travel story, you have these same people at different ages in their lives. From 1953 is the earliest version to possibly even 2052. It's not quite clear, but that's a possibility. And some people are alive in 3 time increments and some aren't, because of course people do die in this story as well. And it kind of reminded me of what I was going to talk about with regard to Lovecraft, because obviously we are three-dimensional beings and we cannot manipulate time. We cannot travel through time. And when we try to think about causality, which is bound to time, because when you do an action, the reaction will always be a little bit later than the action. There is no such thing as action and reaction being simultaneous, although they may seem simultaneous because they happen really, really quickly, one after the other. If you were to really drill down into the timeline, you would see that there is a slight difference, and it could only be a millisecond, but there is a difference. They don't happen at the same time because you have to have the action before you can get the reaction. And what we know from being three-dimensional is time only moves in one direction. You can't go back. You can't go forward. You're always just in the present. And when you then start thinking about time travel and what this means, so what happens if you try to bring something back into the past? What's going to happen if you meet yourself, if you meet your parents, how does that actually work? If you meet a younger self, how much causality will come in? So if I meet myself when I'm 10 years old, how much will that influence myself? So will I then still go back in time? All of these questions which everyone encounters when they think about time travel. And this is what brings me back to my original discussion around Lovecraft. If at some point mankind has managed to unravel the secret that is time and is able to travel through time, and I'm not saying that this will ever be the case, I'm pretty sure we will not go crazy over it because we can envisage it at the moment. We can think about these things. We can theorize about these things without going crazy. Just like people didn't go crazy when somebody proved that the Earth was actually a globe. So why should people go crazy when they find out that they weren't created by God? They're not the pinnacle of creation, but that they were a byproduct of an experiment gone wrong that was carried out by the great old ones. Because that's when you read some of the stories of Lovecraft, it's kind of implied or even said that mankind was actually an accident. We were created because they were trying to do something else, and then we were created by those strange beings that came from other stars, So we don't go crazy thinking about time travel. Why would anybody go crazy thinking, oh, there's a Byakhee, it's not from this world. Oh my God, I think I must go insane now. There is no reason. Another thing that I would like to say about this series is the use of music. The soundtrack is absolutely gorgeous. And interestingly enough, not all of the songs, or probably none of the songs and the music that's used in that series was written specifically for the series. But whoever did the music selection paid such attention to ensuring that they chose music not only because it sounds good, but also if it's a song with lyrics, the lyrics actually pertain to the story to a certain degree. There is one song in particular that stands out to me, and it's by a German composer, I guess. His name is Blixa Bargeld. That's not his real name, obviously. And it's called The Quiet Life. And for those of you who are watching the series or who are going to watch the series, I would really like you to pay attention and look out for that song and pay attention to the lyrics and see when in the series it's played, because it fits so perfectly. It's unbelievable. And it also evokes all of the dreams that the people in this series are having and what they're trying to do. And the song has nothing to do with the film or with the series. So whoever put together the score really did Such a brilliant job. It's really, really amazing. And another one is that I would like to draw your attention to is called Empty the Streets for Me, by Fever Ray. She's a Swedish artist. It's also an old song. It's from 2009, so that's 8 years. And it's just such a haunting song, and it's just used so well in the series that if I had to say what was the most interesting film or TV series that I saw this year, I have to say it wasn't Game of Thrones, because I didn't even watch it. It wasn't Stranger Things Part 2, although that would have been my guess at the beginning of the year, but it was actually Dark, and I'm quite surprised by that. But it was a good surprise. So that's all from me for today. It's Sunday the 9th, or actually it's Saturday the 9th of December. I'll be off for 2.5 weeks, and hopefully during that time I'll get in some gaming, and I'll also try and produce a couple of gaming videos. And until then, I wish you a pleasant weekend. Bye bye.